After 1 week of practice, the Notre Dame quarterback battle is still dead even. A freshman is pushing for playing time in the offensive line. The transfer wide receivers are balling out, and the defense looks like it could be elite once again. We've got the latest from Notre Dame's fall camp on today's Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum, producer at Fox Sports, and I've been covering the Irish since 2020. I'm thrilled to have you here on this Tuesday, August 12th, and thanks for making this your first watch or listen of the day. Quick reminder to hit that subscribe button if you're watching along on YouTube, or follow the podcast wherever you may be listening. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right, Notre Dame has wrapped up the first week of fall camp, and we are now less than 3 weeks away from the season opener against Miami, a game that's shaping up to be one of the biggest of the year, certainly during the first month of the season. The preseason AP poll dropped yesterday with the Irish coming in at number 6 and the Hurricanes at number 10, meaning we're going to get a top 10 showdown right out of the gate. Personally, I think preseason rankings are only relevant to help market games on television, so we're not going to focus on the rankings today. We're going to focus on the latest updates coming out of fall camp for Notre Dame. We'll start with the quarterback battle between CJ Carr and Kenny Minchey, which remains deadlocked after the first week. Then we will shift to a surprising or potentially surprising development at right guard and why transfer wide receivers Malachi Fields and Will Pauling are already turning heads. Finally, I'll share the latest updates on the defense, including a couple depth chart surprises up front and why this group has a chance to be elite once again. But we begin with the biggest story from camp, and honestly, one of the most talked about position battles in all of college football. Right now, it is truly 50-50 between CJ Carr and Kenny Minchey. After 1 week of camp, neither has gone out and taken the starting job, and that's exactly what Marcus Freeman, Mike Denbrock, and Gino Guidugli said they were waiting for. Somebody still has 1 week to step up and make this decision easy for the staff. There's not a clear leader right now, and I think that they're still splitting the reps pretty evenly amongst the two, and I would expect a decision by Marcus Freeman's next press conference, which is on Sunday, August 17th. Notre Dame is going to have a scrimmage this weekend. There's going to be college officials. It's going to be treated as close to a game-like situation as possible, and I believe that once that concludes, that'll be the end of fall camp. Notre Dame will begin their game preparations for Miami. They'll have 2 full weeks to do so, and by that point, they're going to want to name a starter so that they can devote all of those reps gearing up for that big top 10 matchup against Miami with the starting quarterback. Marcus Freeman and Gino Guidugli have stressed throughout this process that the quarterbacks will decide who is the starter with their play. Translates to the staff wanted one guy to go out there, dominate on the practice field, and take the job. But at this point, I don't believe that's happened yet for Kenny Minchey or CJ Carr. But I think Kenny Minchey is in a spot that a lot of people did not expect him to be in. I felt going into camp that it would be a legitimate battle between Kenny Minchey and CJ Carr, and I thought that CJ Carr would ultimately win. That's still very possible, but Kenny Minchey is right there in the mix, and it is a dogfight between the two of them. Minchey, as far as I know, has been as advertised. He's steady, he's calm, he's confident, and he's a consistent decision maker. He's a lower turnover risk, at least right now, which is huge in this competition. Plus, he's more of an asset running the football. We know Mike Denbrock and his history as the offensive coordinator. He loves to run the ball with the quarterback, and Kenny Minchey is better at it than CJ Carr. So advantage Minchey in that respect. He has turned the ball over a little bit as well. But compared to CJ Carr, Minchey's been a little bit more willing to check down and try not to make the big play every single time. He might not be spectacular, at least not right now, but he's been a little bit more reliable than Carr, and he fits what the staff values most: trust with this quarterback, and his poise has been noticeable in team settings. We know that his teammates love him, and I know that when he goes out there, you're not going to get a real emotional guy. He knows what he needs to do. He's going to be steady, and even if he makes a mistake, he's going to reload and get after it on the next play. With CJ Carr, he entered camp as the heavy favorite after a standout spring and a strong summer. He had reportedly been the best quarterback of the three in spring practice, which is a big reason why Steve Angeli elected to enter his name in the transfer portal and ended up at Syracuse, because he looked around and thought CJ Carr or Kenny Minchey was ahead of him, so he left, and then became a two-man battle. And the coaching staff, honestly, expected one of these guys to take control early on in camp, and I believe that's Carr, considering the move he was able to make during the spring and the summer. But that's much different than when you're in camp. There were a lot of guys who were not out there on the practice field every single day in the spring. A lot of starters, a lot of big-time contributors from the previous season who were not out there because they were resting after a 16-game season. So even though he made a big move and it was important, it was always going to come down to what they do in fall camp. And even though he continued with a strong summer, Notre Dame was going to put everything into these first 2 weeks of fall camp, and after 1 week, it is still dead even. That's not to say that CJ Carr hasn't done anything good. He certainly flashed upside. We know about his arm talent. He's mobile too, even if he's not as much of a asset in the design quarterback run game. He can certainly move the pocket around, make throws on the run, and he can make some really incredible deep ball throws, but also some tight window throws as well. But turnovers have been the story with CJ Carr. He threw 3 interceptions on the first day that the media could attend practice, and really the first day of fall camp. 2 were his fault, 1 was not, but then he's had more interceptions scattered throughout camp, and I think that his consistency has not matched his high ceiling, and I think he's just pressing. And he's probably been pressing since that shaky first day instead of playing loose, instead of playing confidently. And look, that's going to happen sometimes when you have a quarterback battle of this magnitude, when the stakes are this high, and you know so much is riding on this. Like, yeah, you're going to be a little bit nervous in practice. And every mistake, everything you do is going to be magnified. And these coaches on the Notre Dame staff, they chart everything. Every completion, every incompletion, every touchdown, every interception. And just because you throw an incomplete pass doesn't mean that it's going to be a mark on you, because as Marcus Freeman has said over and over, they are very process-oriented, not results-driven. So when you look at the situations here now with CJ Carr and Kenny Minchey, it could go either way. Marcus Freeman, Denbrock, Gaduli have all repeated trust is everything. And if they cannot trust CJ Carr to protect the football, they're going to go with Kenny Minchey, even if they believe, and I believe, CJ Carr's ceiling is a little bit higher. Because Notre Dame doesn't need a Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback to win this year. They just need a quarterback who can go out there and not lose games. And I think that either one of these guys have the ability to win games, but they could lose games too, depending on how they make their decisions out there on the field. And neither one of these guys has played meaningful college snaps. So growing pains are inevitable. They're also facing arguably the best secondary in college football every single day in practice. Going up against Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, Devontae Smith, Adon Schuler, Tay Johnson, Luke Talich, Jalen Stroman, like this is trial by fire for both of these young quarterbacks. But as long as they can go out there and just keep the offense moving and not try to make the big play every single time, then they're going to have success because they have so many talented skill players around them, a veteran presence on the offensive line, maybe the best running back room in the entire country, in multiple receiving threats, plus an elite defense to lean on. So I think when you look at this situation, you've got CJ Carr, who is the favorite going in, who's trying to make the big play every time, trying to win the job by making all these great plays. Meanwhile, you have Kenny Minchey, who's more steady, who's been more reliable, and also brings that running threat to the game. Like, that is why you have a situation right now where we're 1 week in and the Notre Dame coaching staff could pick either one of these guys. This battle is not about waiting for one quarterback to fall apart and handing the job to the other by default, or at least that's not what they want. The winner needs to seize it, and they have 1 week to do so. And the fact that it hasn't happened yet is both concerning but also understandable. I think at this point, when you look at these quarterbacks and you think about their expectations for the season, it's fair to expect some uneven play early on in the season, no matter who starts, but both have the tools to grow into the role. As it stands today, I believe that Minchey's steadiness might give him the slight edge, but Carr still has the higher upside, and if he can cut the turnovers down in the next week, he might end up winning the job. Or Kenny Minchey just goes out there and just takes his game to another level. He could go out there and win the job. Either way, I just hope that one of these guys goes out there and wins it, as opposed to one of them loses it and the other gets handed it by default. That is going to be the story here for the next week or so. Does one of these quarterbacks step up and win the job, or do they just lose it, and that's that? While the quarterback job is still up for grabs, there is movement in the trenches, and a freshman could be forcing Joe Rudolph's hand. Plus, 2 new receivers are making a huge first impression. It's coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Tired of endless scrolling trying to find the best deal? Game Time Zone Deals pick the best seats in your section for you. Ever wonder what your view will actually look like before you buy? The app shows you a panoramic seat view, so there are no surprises. With Game Time, the price you see is the price you pay, no hidden fees. And if you're worried about what happens if plans change, the Game Time Guarantee has your back with cancellation protection and more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We all knew that the Notre Dame quarterback battle was going to dominate the headlines in fall camp. And up to this point, it certainly has been the case. But it is not the only interesting development going on offense. There are two very interesting storylines going on at key positions for Notre Dame this fall camp. One is at right guard. I went into camp thinking that Sullivan Absher would be the clear starter at right guard while Charles Jagasaw recovers from his injury. But offensive line coach Joe Rudolph loves to keep us guessing, and history tells us we should always expect the unexpected from him. Go back to 2023. Pat Coogan beat out Billy Schrauth to start at left guard despite the fact that Billy Schrauth had taken all the first team reps during the spring, and Billy Schrauth was a much higher rated recruit. Everyone loved his potential, but then Pat Coogan seemingly came out of nowhere to beat him to be the starting left guard. That same year, Rocco Spindler beat out Andrew Kristofich at right guard. Kristofich had some playing experience before that. Rocco Spindler had not done much, but then he beat him out. So those were two big surprises that year. Followed that up in 2024 when true freshman Anthony Knapp started at left tackle all season long and beat out fifth-year senior Tosh Baker after Charles Jagasaw went out with a torn pectoral injury. Sam Pendleton also won the starting job at left guard to start the season over Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler, despite the fact that both those guys had starting experience. Pat Coogan had started 13 games the year prior, and Sam Pendleton beat them both out as a redshirt freshman. Later on, after he got hurt, they would win their jobs back, but still the fact that Sam Pendleton and Anthony Knapp won in fall camp was very surprising. So we have seen a pattern here. Joe Rudolph doesn't just play the safe choice. He plays the guy he thinks is the best, regardless of seniority. And Brian Smith famously asked on this show, where's Guerby going to play? In reference to Guerby Lambert. And we might have an answer soon, just not at the position most of us expected at the time. Because Guerby Lambert has been getting some first-team reps at right guard, and it is my understanding that he has performed well. Matt Freeman from Irish Sports Daily reported that Sullivan Absher has been a little banged up, not a serious injury or anything like that, but it has opened the door for Lambert. And even though I think that Sullivan Absher is still in the lead, Guerby Lambert is pushing him. And this shouldn't be a surprise. We know about Guerby Lambert's profile. He was the number 2 ranked recruit in Notre Dame's class of 2024, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. He is a beast. He's 6'7", 335 pounds, NFL frame, athleticism, elite skill set. And even though his long-term future is probably at left tackle, Anthony Knapp has left tackle locked down. Emil Wagner has right tackle locked down. And Joe Rudolph's mantra is get the 5 best on the field. And if Guerby Lambert is in the top 5, if he's better than Sullivan Absher at playing offensive line, Joe Rudolph is going to figure out a way to get him on the field. And if Guerby Lambert can hold up at guard, he could win that job. This is a positive for everyone, in my opinion, because I think that this competition should elevate Sullivan Absher's game because now he has to earn the job. He knew he had a great opportunity. He knows that. When Charles Jagasaw went down, he had a golden opportunity to win a starting spot. It is something that he has wanted for a very long time. He could have transferred after this past season, chose not to, wanted to compete, and he's still very much in this competition. Like I said, I still think that he is in the lead. But Lambert's quick development is also a positive because, one, it shows that he's healthy after he had labrum surgery in the spring, and he's living up to his billing from his recruiting days. Both of these guys are massive, and they're athletic, and they're road graders. So Notre Dame can't really go wrong here, so it adds depth and flexibility in case of injury elsewhere. So it's an interesting development. I still think Sullivan Absher is going to be the starter at right guard, but the fact that Guerby Lambert is pushing him and that he's versatile enough that he could play tackle or guard is a very encouraging development for this offense because we know just how good of a player Guerby Lambert could be because his ceiling is that high. Another tackle with an incredibly high ceiling on this Notre Dame team is Will Black. And Will Black is also getting some reps on the interior. Will Black was the top recruit in Notre Dame's most recent recruiting class in 2025, and he is getting some reps with the second-team unit at left guard behind Billy Schrauth. He might be a long-term tackle as well. As a matter of fact, I expect him to be a long-term tackle. But Joe Rudolph said Notre Dame is looking for depth on the interior. They're pretty set at tackle right now. So if Will Black is good enough to compete with some of the best, his best shot at playing time is probably at guard. And he's clearly not competing with Billy Schrauth for the starting job spot, because when Billy Schrauth is healthy, he is arguably one of the best guards in all of college football. But the fact that Will Black is already competing for a spot on the two deep at a position that's not even his natural position is encouraging, right? Because he's only been practicing for just over a week. He was not an early enrollee. He joined the team in the summer. So he's already making moves on the depth chart, and that is very encouraging because Will Black and Guerby Lambert are two of the best offensive line prospects Notre Dame has picked up in a long time, and they're both competing for playing time as a freshman. Guerby Lambert is a redshirt freshman. Will Black is a true freshman, but very encouraging development on the offensive line, while Notre Dame starters, guys like Anthony Knapp, Billy Schrauth, Emil Wagner, Ashton Craig, even though he's coming off an injury, they're known commodities. We can be confident in those guys. But it's the ones who haven't played as much that we don't know about. It's great to hear that they're making moves. Two other guys who are making moves, the transfer wide receivers, Malachi Fields and Will Pauling. If the quarterback competition is still a coin flip, maybe the best news for Notre Dame's offense is that the receivers that they will be throwing to might be better than we thought, and the transfers have been leading the way. Malachi Fields was the big outside target that Notre Dame went out and got from Virginia, and then Ian Book came on this show and compared him to Miles Boykin, and I think we're starting to see that. Miles Boykin had a huge breakout season in 2018, was Ian Book's favorite target that year, ended up having a pretty decent career in the NFL. And right now, Malachi Fields is showing that he is basically everything that Notre Dame hoped that Bo Collins would be last year, plus a little bit more. Notre Dame needed a boundary wide receiver last year. They went out and they got Bo Collins from Clemson, and he had his bright spots on Notre Dame for sure. But I don't think he was consistent enough that he could really take the Notre Dame passing game to another level. But I think Malachi Fields is absolutely capable of doing that. And Fields' career production at Virginia is better than Collins' output at Clemson. Like, Collins' best season when he was with Clemson was around 550 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. Meanwhile, Malachi Fields has had over 800 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns each of the last 2 seasons. And even though that was really exciting when Notre Dame brought him in, you still wanted to see him produce in a Notre Dame uniform. And so far in camp, he has been doing exactly that. He is up there making plays, his NFL traits, certainly NFL size, and he's just physical, and he can make those contested catches that Notre Dame is going to need, because it's not always going to be easy with whatever young and inexperienced quarterback they choose to go with to be the starter. But it's not just Malachi Fields, it's Will Pauling, who apparently has been nicknamed the Goog Rat. I don't know if the Goog Rat is something that I would necessarily welcome, but I think in this case, it's definitely a positive, because Will Pauling has been spending so much time in the Goog, watching film, just getting ready for the next practice. And sometimes Mike Brown, the wide receivers coach, said Will Pauling beats the staff to the facility, and he may have even slept there a couple nights. Seems a little bit crazy, but it's true. He brings professionalism, urgency, and he understands that this is his last year of eligibility before his shot in the NFL. Back in 2023, he had a huge season at Wisconsin. 74 receptions, 837 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. But his production dropped off this past season in 2024. I would attribute most of that to the fact that they didn't really have a quarterback, because the transfer that they brought in, Tyler Van Dyke, ended up missing basically the entire year. Will Pauling only had 42 receptions, 407 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. So he sees Notre Dame as his last best chance to put NFL tape together on a very high visibility team, and he is taking advantage of the opportunity. And this is so important for Notre Dame's offense, because Fields and Pauling look like plug-and-play starters, or at least plug-and-play contributors alongside Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison, because right now I believe the first-team unit at wide receiver is Fields at the boundary, and then Greathouse in the slot, Faison at the field, and then Will Pauling is the first guy off the bench in that rotation. Pauling is more of a true slot. I think you can move around Faison and Greathouse. Either way, these guys are going to get a lot of playing time this year. And this depth means that whoever quarterback one ends up being will inherit a veteran, reliable wide receiving core, which is not something we have been able to say about the Notre Dame wide receiver room in a long time. So this strong skill position depth is huge, and it's going to buy some time for the quarterback to develop chemistry without forcing throws. So those are the really positive developments about the wide receivers and the offensive line. One last thing on the offense. True freshman, running back, Nolan James Jr. is making a move. Some might even say that he's surging right now. I don't know what it's gonna lead to this year, considering how much talent is already in that room. I mean, Notre Dame has 3 players who are named to the Doak Walker preseason award watch list, which means that there are 3 guys on Notre Dame's roster who might end up being the best running back in the country. But what I do know, after a very small sample size with Nolan James, is he has already shown enough that I think he is going to be a no-doubt hit in college. Potentially a very big hit. Notre Dame truly has an embarrassment of riches in the running back room. And even though their offense might still be figuring out who's under center, the battles at right guard and the instant impact from the transfer receivers are signs that this offensive unit is still going to have plenty of firepower and options when the season kicks off. But even though the offense has some really intriguing storylines, the defense is probably the real reason to get excited about this season. I'll tell you why right after this. For as much as we talk about the questions at quarterback and some of the uncertainty on offense, the latest observations coming out of camp about this defense make me think that they are going to be one of the best in the country yet again. And the first team reps are telling us a lot about where Chris Ash's unit might be headed. The media was able to watch the first 4 periods of practice on Sunday, and this is who went out with the first team. On the defensive line, you've got Josh Burnham, Jason Onye, Donovan Heinisch, and Boubacar Traore. A linebacker, Drake Bowen and Jaylon Sneed. And then in the secondary, Devontae Smith at nickel, Luke Talich and Adon Schuler at safety, Leonard Moore and Christian Gray at corner. So plenty of things to take away from this, okay? I think the thing that stood out to me the most, Jason Onye and Donovan Heinisch running out with the first team instead of Gabe Rubio and Jared Dawson. I think that right now, it is my understanding that Onye and Heinisch are the clear-cut starters at D-tackle. A bit of a surprise. Now, this does not mean it can't change before the season opener against Miami. And either way, Rubio and Dawson are going to play a lot this season. But I believe that Onye and Heinisch have earned their spots with the ones, and they have a clear edge right now. I thought Rubio was definitely going to start at 3 technique, especially what he did in the college football playoff last season, filling in for Riley Mills. And maybe this is just a sign that Jason Onye has played really well in camp. Ever since he returned to the team back in the spring, this is a player who's generated a lot of buzz. He's bigger, he's stronger than he was before. But personally, I had some questions about how he would get acclimated to playing football again, considering he missed the second half of last season because his last game was in September. But he has gone back on the practice field, and he has kept that momentum from spring, and he's kept it going through camp so far. Donovan Heinisch starting is less of a surprise because we know he's a relentless worker. He has a great motor, and he has come up with big plays in the past. Like, people forget, Donovan Heinisch had the game-sealing sack against Georgia in the college football playoff. And I still believe that Jared Dawson, the transfer from Louisville, could absolutely make a move. He could be an impact player for the team this season. I think he just has to be a little bit more consistent, whereas, like, Donovan Heinisch is never going to be outworked. You know what you're going to get from him every single rep, every single play, but Dawson does have better size and could be more of a disruptor. Either way, you're going to be able to rotate those guys frequently. I do think that Burnham over Bryce Young at end is a little bit of a surprise considering how high I am on Bryce Young, but maybe I shouldn't be surprised because Josh Burnham started over Bryce Young last season. They had R.J. Oben in there as well. But either way, these guys are going to rotate a lot, and this is still just 1 week into camp. So some interesting stuff going on in the defensive line. At linebacker, very positive thoughts there. It really feels like the year where Jaylon Sneed just puts it all together. Drake Bowen is locked in at the Mike linebacker. We know that. And considering how high the staff is on KVA, I kind of felt like he was the safe pick to win the job at will linebacker, and then Bowen and KVA would be your 2 primary guys with Jaylon Sneed and Jaden Osbury rotating in. But at this point, Jaylon Sneed is the starter at will linebacker. He used to play rover. He was not considered an every down linebacker, more of like a gadget player, would come in to rush a pass or things like that, something that he's very good at. We saw that against Penn State in the most critical play of the game. But now it looks like he's added size, he's added strength, and he's become a much more consistent player. And now they trust him on the field as an every down player. We're still going to see a ton of KVA. We're still going to see a ton of Jaden Osbury. But Jaylon Sneed had one of the best spring practices of anyone on this team, and he has followed that up with a really strong camp up to this point. Linebackers coach Max Bullis spoke to the media on Sunday. He's been very complimentary of this group. He's a very intense guy. I love listening to him talk in his limited media availability. And he said that they have a true 4-man rotation right now, and then true freshman Man Framo as he's like the next guy in. Framo is not as ready to play in college like KVA was last year, but that's fine. KVA is like a special player, and even though Man Framo is not as close to he was, I do think that, say, by October, you're going to start to see Man Framo a little bit more. He's also going to be a factor on special teams. So either way, Notre Dame has 4 really strong linebackers right now to rotate primarily at 2 spots, even though they might have Rover out there on the field sometimes. They're predominantly nickel defense, which only has 2 linebackers on the field, and they're going to rotate between these 4 guys. And if Sneed ends up playing to his ceiling and KVA takes a big step forward like we all expect, and Jane Osbury cleans up some of those mistakes from the end of last season, that could be one of, if not the best linebacker units in the entire country. That is how high I am on that unit. I'm also very high on the secondary at Notre Dame. But when you look at how they lined up with Moore and Gray at corner, you got Devontae Smith at nickel, nothing surprising there. Safety, we know it's going to be Don Schuler, but who is going to be the other safety? Luke Talich went out there with the first team on Sunday, but I also expect Virginia Tech transfer Jalen Stroman to really fight for that spot and potentially take it here in the very near future. Stroman is more experienced. He has certainly made a move in camp. He's been getting some reps with the ones as well. But that's not to say that Luke Talich hasn't been playing well either. I think he's been good, and I think that Tate Johnson has been arguably the best playmaker on either side of the ball throughout camp. Tate Johnson had 2 interceptions on the first day, and John Bryce from Irish Illustrated and Football Scoop has reported that he's made a lot more interceptions in the time since. So either way, Notre Dame can't really go wrong at safety, but these guys bring different things to the table. Stroman is more experienced. He's played at the Power 4 level. Luke Talich has been more of a reserve player at Notre Dame, and then Tate Johnson is coming in as a redshirt freshman with all the potential in the world, but he's got to clean up his mistakes and be someone that the coaching staff can trust. And you consider the fact that Notre Dame is going to play one of, if not their biggest game of the year all season in that season opener. They probably trust Jalen Stroman a little bit more. Same with Luke Talich because he's been around the program for one more year than going with a guy like Tate Johnson. But do not get mistaken. Tate Johnson is going to make some plays for this Notre Dame defense this fall. So you look at this group right now, I think that they're going to kind of mix and match what they do at safety. I think they are going to rotate depending on the opponent. Like they're probably going to rotate a lot more against Purdue at safety than they are against Miami or Texas A&M. But the fact that Luke Talich is fighting off Jalen Stroman to some extent and Tate Johnson as well should tell you a lot about Luke Talich, because we've heard a lot about Tate Johnson. The fact that Luke Talich is out there, he's still getting reps with the ones, is very encouraging development as well, because it shows you just how highly the staff thinks of him as well, because they have a bunch of talent in the back end and a bunch of different guys to choose from. But Luke Talich getting the first team reps right now, Jalen Stroman getting some reps with them as well, and then Tate Johnson seemingly just picking off all the quarterback passes. So in closing, if you are nervous about the uncertainty at quarterback, I get it. But here's your silver lining. This defense might be the best that Notre Dame has had in years. And last year, they had a top 5 defense. Year before that, they had a great defense. They have proven playmakers at every level. They have elite depth at linebacker and in the secondary, and they have the kind of flexibility that allows Chris Ash to mix and match for any opponent. The only mild question I have about the defense right now is whether the interior defensive line can hold up against elite offensive lines. But if Onye and Heinisch keep playing like they have been in camp, even that could turn into a strength. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Irish. Thank you so much for tuning in and making this your first watch or listen of the day. Before you head out, be sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube, like the video below, or if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or any other podcast platform, please follow, rate, and review the show. I'm going to have a new episode coming out every morning the rest of this week with some fun guests lined up, so you are not going to want to miss it. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow.